I'm about to tell you something that's going to sound absolutely ridiculous at first. There's one psychological method that can literally make you never get angry at anyone again. Ever. And no, this isn't some meditation, nonsense, or breathing exercise garbage. This is actual science. You're probably thinking, yeah, right, another clickbait promise. But here's the thing, I'm dead serious. And by the end of this video, you're going to understand exactly why your anger has been completely pointless this entire time. Why it's been like paying rent for an apartment you don't even live in. Picture this scenario, you're driving to work, already running late because your alarm didn't go off. Traffic is moving slower than a Windows 95 computer loading the internet. Then some absolute genius in a BMW cuts you off without signaling, nearly taking your bumper with them. Your blood pressure spikes. Your hands grip the steering wheel like you're trying to choke it. You start planning exactly what you'd say to this person if you could get out of your car. Right now, sound familiar? Of course it does, because this is the human condition. We get angry at other people constantly. Your coworker who takes credit for your ideas, your neighbor who plays music too loud, your mother-in-law who makes passive-aggressive comments about your life choices. We're walking around like emotional pinballs, getting triggered by everyone else's behavior. But here's what's going to blow your mind. Every single time you get angry at another person, you're making one fundamental error, one massive psychological mistake that's been studied and documented for decades. And once you understand this mistake, anger becomes literally impossible. The method I'm talking about is called the fundamental attribution error, and it's going to change everything about how you see other people's behavior. Before we dive deep into this, make sure you hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell. Trust me, you're going to want to remember this information, and I've got more psychology content coming that's going to revolutionize how you think about human behavior. Now, let's get back to that BMW driver who cut you off. In that moment of rage, what were you thinking about them? They're selfish, they're inconsiderate, they're a terrible person who doesn't care about anyone else. You created an entire personality profile for this stranger based on 30 seconds of driving behavior. This is the fundamental attribution error in action. When someone does something we don't like, we immediately assume it's because of their character, their personality, their moral failings. We attribute their behavior to who they are as a person. But when we do something similar, oh, that's different. That's because of our circumstances. Think about the last time you cut someone off in traffic. Did you think to yourself, I'm such a terrible, selfish person? Of course not. You thought, I'm late for an important meeting, or I didn't see them in my blind spot, or I am having a really stressful day. You gave yourself the benefit of circumstances, but you don't extend that same courtesy to others. This isn't conscious. This isn't something you're choosing to do. This is how your brain is literally wired. It's an automatic psychological process that happens faster than you can think. Your brain takes a shortcut when processing other people's behavior, and that shortcut leads directly to anger and frustration. Here's the fascinating part. Research shows that we do this backwards attribution thing constantly. A study by psychologist Lee Ross found that when people are asked to explain their own behavior versus other people's behavior, they consistently attribute their own actions to situational factors and other people's actions to personality traits. Let me give you another example. Your boss snaps at you during a meeting. Your immediate thought? They're a jerk. They're power hungry. They don't respect their employees. But what if I told you their spouse was just diagnosed with cancer? What if they haven't slept in 3 days because they're dealing with a family crisis? What if they just found out the company might be laying off half the staff? Suddenly, their behavior makes perfect sense. It's not about their character at all. It's about their circumstances. But here's the kicker. You'll never know their circumstances. You'll never have the full picture of what's happening in another person's life. So every time you get angry at someone, you're getting angry at a fictional character you've created in your head based on incomplete information. Think about that for a second. You're literally getting mad at your own imagination. This is why anger at other people is completely pointless. You're not angry at the real person. You're angry at your interpretation of their motives, which is almost always wrong. It's like getting furious at a movie character for being evil when you don't realize they're actually the hero and you just walked into the theater halfway through. Now, I can already hear some of you pushing back. But what about truly terrible people? What about people who are genuinely cruel or abusive? Fair question. And yes, there are people who consistently make harmful choices, but even then, understanding the difference between behavior and character changes everything. Someone might engage in harmful behavior because of trauma, mental illness, addiction, or circumstances you can't see. This doesn't excuse the behavior. Consequences still matter. Boundaries still need to be set, but it eliminates the anger because you understand that their actions aren't about you. They're about whatever internal or external pressures are driving their choices. Here's another mind-bending fact from psychology research. Studies show that people who cut you off in traffic aren't any more likely to be selfish in other areas of their life. The correlation between driving behavior and personality traits is essentially zero. That BMW driver might volunteer at homeless shelters every weekend. They might be rushing to pick up their sick child from school. But your brain doesn't care about statistical probability. It wants a simple explanation right now, so it creates a story about who this person is based on one moment of behavior. The method to never get angry again is this: always assume positive intent and situational factors first. Always. This doesn't mean being naive or ignoring red flags. It means recognizing that behavior is almost always about circumstances, not character. When someone is rude to you, instead of thinking they're a rude person, think they must be having a difficult day. When someone doesn't respond to your text, instead of thinking they don't care about me, think they're probably busy or dealing with something. When someone makes a mistake that affects you, instead of thinking they're careless, think they're probably overwhelmed or distracted. This isn't positive thinking nonsense. This is statistically more accurate thinking. Research consistently shows that situational factors influence behavior far more than personality traits. You're literally training your brain to be more correct about reality. And here's what happens when you start thinking this way. The anger just disappears because you can't be angry at circumstances. You can't be furious at someone's stressful day or their family problems or their lack of sleep. Anger requires a target. And when you stop creating fictional villains out of strangers, there's nothing left to be angry at. Let me tell you about a study that perfectly demonstrates this. Researchers had people read about someone who was late to an important meeting. When they only knew the person was late, participants rated them as irresponsible and inconsiderate. But when they learned the person was late because they stopped to help an elderly man who had fallen, suddenly the same behavior was seen as admirable, same action. Late to the meeting, completely different emotional response based on context. This proves that your anger isn't really about what people do. It's about the story you tell yourself about why they did it. Now, some of you might be thinking, but this seems like I'm just making excuses for everyone's bad behavior. Wrong. This is about accuracy, not excuses. Most of the time, when someone does something that annoys you, it really is because of circumstances you can't see. You're not making excuses, you're acknowledging reality. And for those rare cases where someone is genuinely choosing to be harmful, understanding that their behavior comes from their own pain, dysfunction, or circumstances still eliminates your anger. Hurt people hurt people. Someone who's consistently cruel is dealing with something you can't see. This doesn't mean you accept the behavior, but it means you respond from clarity instead of rage. Here's the practical application. The next time someone does something that would normally make you angry, pause for exactly 3 seconds. In those 3 seconds, ask yourself, what circumstances might explain this behavior? Come up with 3 possible explanations that have nothing to do with their character. Traffic example, they're rushing to the hospital, they didn't see me, they're dealing with a family emergency, rude customer service, they've been yelled at all day, they're worried about getting fired, they're dealing with personal problems. Friend who cancels plans, they're not feeling well. Something came up with their family, they're overwhelmed with work. Once you practice this for a few weeks, it becomes automatic. Your brain starts defaulting to situational explanations instead of character assassinations. And without those character assassinations, there's nothing to be angry about. This method works because it aligns your thinking with psychological reality. The fundamental attribution error exists because it was evolutionarily useful. When you encountered a potentially dangerous person, it was better to assume they were dangerous by nature rather than just having a bad day. But in modern life, this mental shortcut causes more problems than it solves. You're walking around getting angry at people who are probably just struggling with circumstances you know nothing about. You're creating stress and conflict based on stories your brain makes up in the absence of information. It's exhausting and it's unnecessary. Here's what's really beautiful about this method. It doesn't just eliminate anger, it increases empathy and connection. When you start seeing other people's behavior as a result of circumstances rather than character flaws, you naturally become more compassionate. You start seeing the humanity in everyone's struggles. And paradoxically, this makes you more effective at dealing with difficult people. When you're not angry, you can think clearly. You can set boundaries without emotion. You can address problems without creating additional conflict. You become the person who stays calm in chaos, and that's a superpower in both personal and professional relationships. Remember, this isn't about becoming a doormat or accepting unacceptable behavior. It's about responding to problems from a place of clarity rather than rage. Sometimes the most compassionate response is a firm boundary. Sometimes understanding someone's circumstances means recognizing they're not capable of the relationship you want and walking away peacefully. The goal isn't to excuse everything, it's to understand everything. And when you understand instead of judge, anger becomes impossible. You might feel sad about someone's circumstances. You might feel frustrated with a situation, but you won't feel that burning personal anger that comes from believing someone and is deliberately trying to hurt you. So here's your challenge for the next week. Every time you feel anger rising toward another person, stop and apply this method. Ask yourself what circumstances might explain their behavior. Choose the interpretation that assumes positive intent and situational factors. Watch how quickly the anger dissolves when you stop creating villains out of strangers. This one psychological insight can literally transform your entire emotional life. You'll stop taking things personally because you'll understand that most things aren't personal at all. You'll become the person who doesn't get triggered by other people's behavior because you understand that their behavior isn't about you. It's about their circumstances, and that's the ultimate freedom. When you stop letting other people's circumstances control your emotions, you become truly free. You become someone who can navigate the world with compassion instead of anger, with understanding instead of judgment. And trust me, that's a much better way to live.